I'm good. First, thank you so much. I know this is a busy time for everybody, being at the end of the semester. A lot of you are probably involved in TA projects. And I'm really excited to be here. And just for you folks online, there's an address that's coming up. It's just tinyurl.com/BYU December 2016. I'll leave that up for a minute while I talk. Oh, did I maybe not turn on here? Test. Oh, yeah. We have volume. So as Charles said, I do have some experience in blended learning, but I wanted to do something a little different just because I knew I was going to be with a group of graduate students today, and I haven't had a chance to talk to many of you. So this is going to be two-way, because this is quite fresh, what we've been working on, and I think we've developed some interesting work. But we've really run into some snags, some difficulties. And Tara, I'm going to do a little shout out about learner engagement. I put a slide in just for you. So it's a chance for you to actually give us some feedback. So what this is, and I think this is exciting, and I think this is hopefully a way that we can move more. A lot of the work that I've done, we've focused just specifically on courses. And that can be interesting, but as most of us know, a course is a course. I mean, in terms of really developing an individual, you've got to look at the entire program. So what we're going to do in the next about 40 minutes or so is just take some initial work at what we've been doing in terms of evaluating our teacher education program at Mount Royal University. And what I want to do, it was interesting, we were having a really fascinating conversation with another fella, Michael Barber, and many of you may know his name. He really is the guru in terms of K-12 online and blended learning. And you know, that blended learning can be really fuzzy. And I think, again, how important it is that it's contextual, but that both the students, the faculty, and all the professional staff are clear about what blended learning means in your institution, or for us, we actually have a departmental definition. So I'm going to just talk about what blended learning means to us, and then, Tara, I need you to help me on this. I put in a slide just for us. Okay. Engagement can mean many things to many people, and that's sort of our framework that we're using in terms of evaluating the program, is looking at student perceptions, but their perceptions at the end of their first year, at the end of the year, fourth year, when they graduate, just changes the perception about engagement with our program. So you're going to help me a little with engagement, okay? Big word. And then just talk a little bit about the methodology, and where I want to spend all the time is really on our preliminary findings. And again, I'd love some feedback from you on the findings. So I think we're ready to go with the online gang. Then tinyurl.com/BYU December 2016. It's a series of Google Slides. So again, I'm really not good at working in both worlds at the same time, but it's a Google Slide, so you can leave comments in there in the online world, and you can as well in the audience. If I often find, gosh, I wish I said that, but it's a day later, so feel free to add comments as we go through. Okay, so blended learning. And it's interesting, Charles, we were just talking about this morning. There's been a lot of work in the States, especially with the Babson College, the Babson report. And when they look at blended learning, they're really looking at the percentage of time that students are sitting in seats. Now, our institution follows their definition. I have a bit of an issue with that, because I'm not sure that sitting in a seat is always leading to learning. And does it matter if somebody's sitting in this seat for 20% of the time or 80% of the time? But our institutional definition is that a blended learning course is reducing seat time somewhere between 30 and 80%. So at a minimum, 1/3 of the physical class time is gone. So if we were meeting 3 times a week, an hour on Monday, an hour on Wednesday, an hour on Friday, one of those hours is gone. We just found in a teacher education program that definition wasn't working for us, because it really wasn't getting at learning. So our program, and I'll talk about it, is Charles and I, we use these fancy words, praxis. But what we're really trying to do is provide students with experiential opportunities to connect at a personal, very personal level, theory with practice. So you'll see how our program's set up in a minute. But for blended learning for us, it was really not just the blending, the integration of what was happening in the classroom with their field practices. And I think this is so important, because we're helping students develop their professional identity as a teacher. And the students don't come into our program. They're usually between 18 to 24, but they have so much life experience. And how we need them to understand that they're coming in with that experience and how we can build on it and how we can shift from them being just sitting there, you're being active, but just sitting there taking in information to really being part of our community and being active and really challenging me. So we start with this, and again, I'm a tennis player, and I'm also work with somebody who loves Venn diagrams, so I use them, but finding that sweet spot. So here's the way our program's organized, and it's probably not much different than yours, but we've tried to be intentional again about combining classroom with field experience. So the first 2 year, students are out each semester, and I wouldn't call it volunteer, but they're more beginning to observe, working with small groups and reading. But again, every semester they're out in schools, and they're out in different types of schools, what we would call sort of social, economically challenged areas in our city. They're out, we do have charter schools in we'll talk more about charter schools later this afternoon, but private schools, we're trying to give them the whole gamut of experience, because again, that gives them opportunities to see learning happening in different contexts. So again, from first to second year, we're increasing the amount of time. Third year, they're getting more. And then fourth year, they're out for almost not only the entire year, but that's where we're starting to hold the courses. We're actually coming out to the schools and we're doing the classes in partnership with the mentor teachers. And I think that's exciting because not only are they being part of my community, they're being part of the local school boards and the private school boards. And in the final, we have a capstone experience where they all are doing an action research project. We take them through the full board, the full formal, I think it's IRB, we call it Human Research Ethics Board that we have to go through. So that's the way it goes. The other thing that we've moved to, and this is where I was hoping Rick would actually be here so I could pick on Rick, but you've probably fooled around with these things a lot as well. This idea of e-portfolios, and we found they've been more of a hindrance than a help. Basically, it's a scrapbook. People are just collecting stuff and just putting it in here. So working with our local school boards, and our school boards are trying to move away from report cards to each student having what's called a student learning plan that begins in kindergarten and they maintain it to grade 12. So, you know, a lot of the typical things that you would see in a portfolio, the teaching evaluations that they're getting, we are working on a framework that's based on 5 major competency areas: planning, facilitation, assessment. We calling it the environment rather than classroom management, because we're trying to create a really powerful learning environment for the young children. And last but not least, the professional roles and responsibilities. So what we're trying to do is get the teacher candidates not only to collect information, but here's where we're really trying to get them to work. Okay, you've got the stuff, you reflect on it, so you know where you are right now as a teacher, but most importantly, where do you want to go? So the goal setting is important, but where we find the rubber really doesn't hit the road is helping our students develop the strategies to get from where they are now to where they want to be. And those strategies always aren't just, you know, opening up a textbook or doing something, but who do you need to connect with? Who do you need to work with? Who do you need to get mentorship? And I'll be honest, this has been really successful, and it's really exciting for me because the one thing I love to do, and I always do, I teach the technology courses, but I also teach the introductory course. So the course they get first year, first semester, and I teach the capstone at the end. So it's wonderful for me to see them at the beginning of their journey and as they go through the journey, the learning, and it's just wonderful to see how this develops as they go through time. Now what we found, it's been really exciting as well, and probably you're finding it, there's a whole plethora of software out there, Google Sites, Weebly, I can't even remember all these tools. But what's exciting is we're more concerned about the process and the framework, and we do have sort of initially just set up a template in Google Site, but it's really exciting to see very quickly how students move out of that and they support each other in whatever platform they want to use. We're honest, the only platform we can formally support is Google. We're sort of a Google-licious institution, it's all Google. But if you're willing to go on there, fine, we just don't know if legally if they're going to start collecting fees. But right at the beginning, it's wonderful to see the students beginning to take ownerships of these professional learning plans and really customizing it and really starting to see their personalities coming out. Okay. Tara, can you help me? You told me this is the first thing you do in your survey. We were talking about it because, again, we often go in with intentions about what we think engagement are. So I think we can do this online as well. Would you mind just turning to a partner, someone at your table, But I'm curious to hear from you, before I go in and talk about our engagement frameworks and models, what does this mean to you? This can potentially be the most overused word that we have in the academy. And our institution is just a little over 100 years old. And if you look at every mission statement, every learning plan from our institution, engagement is there. So just if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment, I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this online. Oh, they have a chat room. Great. Can they do the chat? Please, please. Can they just, the concept, whatever it means to you, or if you've been working with students, what does that word engagement, or we can maybe empowerment. And we can use this for your study. Any data you can use now.
Yeah, it's all hard to do.
They try to get attention.
But yeah, so I've
Okay, yeah. Let's go Cougars. Have they finished for the season? Okay, isn't the BYU, just so you know, isn't the BYU Cougars? Because it's the Mount Royal Cougars as well. Just feeling pretty good that we have the same team. So I'm just going to point over to the online. And if we can just, but isn't it wonderful the words we use? I hear curiosity, I hear interest, I hear optimism. It was over here, I heard you talk about being present. I was so excited. Emily, can I pick on you? Because you had a great idea. It is active, but active for what sake? And this is something I have to think we have to be careful for. We can create a lot of activities, but what's the purpose? We've got a lot of students doing a lot of busy work, but is it really meaningful engagement? Just anybody else want to contribute? But I felt the passion, I felt the energy. Tara, when you've been coding a few of them, what have engagements meant to some of the folks at, I think it's BYU Idaho, the group you're working with, isn't it?
Students here.
Oh, it's students here, wrong study. Sorry, wrong study. Okay, sorry, Tara, I'm getting confused. So that's great. What do students at BYU say when you ask this question?
A lot of them say it's the students who participate in class, like asking questions, and some of them will say, it's interesting because some have said, oh, if they take notes, then they're engaged, and others have said, I think it's not just taking notes, it's they have to ask questions, they have to want to talk to the teacher, and so it's really just for a lot of, and we've interviewed mostly seniors so far, but a lot of them have said asking questions and participating in the actual course when they're meeting.
And again, I want to emphasize, a comment coming up?
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm looking in case
This is my audio.
Oh, the audio. But what I'm finding, that's why I really enjoy the blended learning environment, because I think we can engage in different ways and we can help students find voices in different ways. And Charles has heard this too much, but I live through my two boys. I have one boy who's very introverted. He's not shy, he's outgoing, and the other one is like me, he's hyper. But it's really interesting, I think, Tara, we have to remember those that are introverted. He's the sort of person, he's listening to you in the classroom, he's not taking notes, because he's right plugged in, and he doesn't feel comfortable asking questions, but you get him in an online discussion after the class, and that's the voice you're going to hear. So I think that's it, but I'm just worried sometimes in a class situation, we privilege those people that are maybe a little extroverted at the expense of introversion. So just something to think about. Now, it is interesting, and Charles, this is why I'm excited. Has anybody heard of Dennis before? So he's the only person in the United States who served both terms on Obama's Educational Advising Committee. And he runs a rock star nonprofit charter school. It's called bigpicture.org. If you haven't heard of it, you gotta go for it. And again, these slides will have all the links that are live. So Dennis does a lot of work with us in curriculum reform in Canada. And it's kind of fun because we have his 3 R's, which makes sense. but my students have converted his 3 R's to the 5 C's. You want to hear our C's of engagement, Tara? This is for you. So the first C, and I saw it come up in the online discussion, is that sense of curiosity. I think it's wonderful. You know, if you ever get a chance to work with kindergarten or grade 1 students, it's just innate. You know, they put dirt in their mouth, whatever. We have to maintain that all the way through. Do not kill the we're not going there. Do not kill the curiosity. So the first one, the C is curiosity. The second C that goes with relevance is connections. I think we're always excited when we can see how learning relates to us. Kate, I'm going to pick on you because my one son's a big climber and my wife's a big ice climber. Isn't it neat how you can see that one form of climbing then can transform into another one? So it was so exciting for him to go out with Mom for the first time with the ice picks and have the crampons on. But I think it's exciting when we can see this class, we can see ourselves in the course. So those are the first 2 C's. I've got another sister who's an outward bound instructor, and she's worked with dog sleds and all over. And I think you better than anyone else understand the whole principle. It's all based on on Piaget's work. Remember learning, we talk about creating cognitive disconnect or discomfort. And that's really what the outward bound model is trying to put people out of their comfort level, and then they have to assimilate or accommodate that new learning to go back in. So our third C is that sense of challenge. And I think students love it when they're challenged in their classes. And I don't mean we have to turn everything into a game, but they're excited when they work on a real meaningful problem and they're able to come up with some solution. The last R, we have 2 C's for that, and I think it's so important, this idea of collaboration, that we're working together. And I won't go on any political rants here, but we need, as a whole species, to learn how to work together. Collaboration is key, and I think we need to learn how to work in communities to do that. So that's our 5 C's. So that's Dennis Litke, wonderful resources there, bigpicture.org. It's mainly a junior high, I'll talk to you in a bit, just a, but it's focused on the kids finding problems they want to examine, and then they build the curriculum around that question. Go for it.
So I got curiosity, connections, challenge, and collaboration. I missed number 5.
Okay, so we've got curiosity and connections were the first 2. Challenge is the third. Collaboration and community are the last 2. Thanks. Quote my students on that one. So we've got Dennis, and then we've got Mihai. Do you know who Mihai is? It's why we do so well in the Winter Olympics. No, I'm teasing you, and I'm not really though. So this fella is a Hungarian psychologist, and he did a lot of work in the 70s. He's the one who coined the term being in the zone. This is back to what you were saying about being present. We want students in the moment. So we probably have, and I'm being egotistical, but probably one of the really coolest sports psychology groups in the world, because our university is still, it's the only university that has a covered oval. It was the first oval, and then you guys got yours down in Salt Lake. But we've got a lot of our students are Olympic athletes, so we've got these people to work with. And he shows up about every 4 years to work with our sports psychologist, just to make everybody sure our visualization techniques are right, everybody's good on the bobsled. So if you haven't read his work, it's kind of cool, and you can just Google stuff, you don't have to read it all. But it really is interesting about getting students present. So it's moving from that external to that internal motivation, and they're excited to be there. So we've got Dennis, we've got Mihai, and then we've got Dan. And you might have read some of Dan Pink's books, you know, The Whole Brain, whatever. I'm learning more and more about Dan. All these folks live in Massachusetts, by the way, as well. So I didn't realize he was the speechwriter for Al Gore when Al Gore was the vice president under Bill Clinton. So he's an interesting guy, and both of Dan's children go to a bigpicture.org charter school. So if you look at this book, Drive, and again, you can get sort of, just take small portions of it, but it's based on extensive interviews with Mihai and examples from his 2 children about how they're learning in the bigpicture.org. So his idea for engagement is this sense of autonomy, and we can call it self-regulation, self-direction. I'm really going to push you on co-regulation, though. I don't think it can happen just with one person. I think we need to co-regulate. But this sense of autonomy, that you really are taking ownership for your learning. Another fella, and Olga, he's Canadian, Malcolm Gladwell. You've probably heard of Gladwell, Tipping Point, all that. So he grew up just not that far away from I did. Believe it or not, he used to be an incredible track athlete. Man, that guy could run. He's got the hair, so I'm so jealous because I don't look in the mirror, but I don't have the hair like him. Anyway, he wrote that book, Tipping Point, and it talks about mastery. If you want to be good, on that, if you want to be on the dome or something down there, you've got to practice the mastery. It takes hours and hours. He talks about the Beatles were in all these underground pubs and stuff in Germany before they really made it onto the stage, hockey players. So there's a sense of autonomy, the sense of mastery, and again, it's wonderful being at an institution like BYU where you've got a clear faith-based mission. There's a purpose. And I think that's important, and I think that's what a lot of our kids are missing these days, is a real purpose that goes with their learning. So we've got that. Sorry about the infomercial, but I just wanted to get that out. So here's us. What happens is that some of you, I know Charles did his doctoral program at Indiana University. Has anybody visited the campus at Indiana University Bloomington? If you're thinking about doctoral work, we were talking about it the other night. It's a huge campus because every tree they pull down for a new building, they have to plant another one. But this is where this thing calls the National Survey of Student Engagement. They've got this Center for Research in Higher Education there, and it was a fellow, George Koo, who ran it. And it's the US report used to rank your institutions. Maclean's magazine, Olga, in Canada would rank our institutions, and it was based on, I'm teasing you guys, I heard your basketball team lost to Utah Valley. Anyway, it was used to be based on how the sports teams did, how many people like us had PhDs, how many books are in the library. And they said, maybe there's a better measure. Maybe we should think of Tara and Christian's research, that it should be on students' perceptions of how they're engaged. So that's one measure we use. There's a bunch of other things. Our national newspaper does a survey. We actually have a Canadian-wide survey we do. But we're a relatively new institution, so our administration is very interested in how we do with these rankings. So a lot of our course design, our program evaluation is based on this framework. And the way the framework works is it's looking at student perceptions at the end of their first year and at the end of the fourth year about how they perceive they're engaged, not just in the classroom, but how they feel connected and engaged in the community of the institution. Now these have changed a little bit. They've actually shrunk it down to 4 benchmarks, but this is a study that we've been doing for the past 6 years, so we went with the original set of benchmarks. So it's looking at, Tara, the qualitative nature of interactions between students and faculty members. It's looking at the interactions that you're having between peers with active and collaborative learning. It's looking at that sense of challenge, how you're being pushed, nudged out of your comfort level. It's looking at enriching educational experience, so it's like international travel, clubs, sports, and last but not least, what sort of environment is being supported? Now this little sea snake has taken off all over the world. So not only is it all throughout the United States and Canada, but it's throughout all of Australia and New Zealand. It's called the Aussie, all through South Africa, the SASE. And about a month ago, I was in Ireland, and I didn't realize they have the Irish Survey of Student Engagement. They've just started it there. So here we go. Methodology, it was pretty simple. This was an online survey. Oh, before I get there, this is interesting. This is a really worthwhile book, and I'll just send you the address. This is a fellow, George Koo, because I think it's 12 years now they've been running the National Survey of Student Engagement. So the data they have is just overwhelming. And what he did is he sat down once he retired and tried to synthesize what's working, what's not working, what are some really neat case studies that we could look at certain things. And this is a bit of a framework that we follow when we were doing our evaluation work, is that it's not too difficult to plan and identify what you want to do, although the transcription Tara and others can be a bit of a pain. Eh? So it's not completely easy to collect data, but it starts to get a little harder when you're starting to analyzing it. The sharing the results I love doing, that's my favorite part. But where it starts to get a little more difficult is based on what you found, how do we actually implement changes, but then how do we assess the impact of the change so it's a continuous cycle? So we're right here, and I'm going to talk about now some of the changes that we've made to our program based on the feedback. So we had pretty good survey response. It was done, again, we went through the human ethics, but it was done during a class session, and it was 4th year students working with the 1st year students, and then it was graduates of our program working with the 4th years. So it's amazing, Tara, I find you can get a lot better response rate often if it's a student administrating the survey or explaining it to other students and why they want to do it. So again, we're going to look at 2 cohorts, 2 graduating cohorts, a cohort that just graduated last spring and one a year ago, and I'll show you what we found. So the first thing we found, and this may seem simplistic to you, but we've always been concerned about access. We're a bit like Utah Valley University. We're an open access program. There are certain requirements in terms of grades and GPA to get in, but we're always concerned about the access that students have with technology. So these are the two initial first years, and always on this side will be the two at the end of the fourth year. And it was exciting for us to see that 100% of our students had laptops. So we don't have to call it a mandatory laptop program. The wonderful thing is that we know that they've got their laptops so that when they go into the K-12 schools, all our K-12 schools are wired, you can bring in it. They know how to use their laptop when they go into school. And selfishly for us, it meant all our rooms are like this. We ripped all the computers out because it was costing us a lot of money. Every 3 or 4 years, we're replacing those desktop computers, and we just found they're not the greatest for having really meaningful conversations. So it's saving us money, and we were able to redo. We don't have any computer labs in our department anymore. We have areas with this, which I think are rich areas for the students to work in. Okay, the first one, Tara, as you know, it's the nature of the interactions you have with your faculty member. And I was just sharing a resource with you. It's Richard Light from Harvard University. He's been studying students at Harvard since about the mid-'80s and coming out with conclusions. And his conclusion, it's key for an undergraduate student to get to know at least one faculty member really well, because that becomes your mentor, and it's more than just reference letters. It's just your connector as you move through life. So here's some of the indicators they're looking at. Oh, and I just want to show you again, it's nice when we work with this data because we're working with the same data sets that they're working with nationally in our country. So it was interesting. This is out of 62, believe it or not, Olga, we'll work it for you when you're finished and come back to Harvard. We only have 62 universities in our country. I think that's less than in the state of California, which has more people. But we didn't do so well. I was surprised because we have relatively small class sizes. So just remember, the interaction doesn't always happen in a class. So as an institution, we weren't too happy with the 26. And this might be a little tough to read at the back, so I'll just give it to you, the color coding. The one thing that we were doing relatively well, we didn't do it well in the beginning. This is students saying that often or very often, they get not only good quality feedback, but timely feedback from the faculty members. Initially, it went from 78 to 48, and we had a real problem when we ran that first year of our fourth year. And the students were right. I mean, it was taking sometimes months to get major assignments back. But that's something that's not too bad. The other thing that we're looking at is discussing the readings, and more than your grades, your readings, you're excited outside of class time, maybe office hours. You're talking about career plans with a faculty advisor or a member. And the one thing that we were really concerned at, because what we're trying to really do is embed sort of that habit of mind about always being reflective about your practice and moving from just journaling to really getting involved in action research. That's a real hallmark for us at our institution. So we were a little concerned. Initially, they didn't plan to do it. And very few of our students were working with us or others outside. So here's a couple recommendations we came up with, is again, with a little help, we've gotten a lot of our students involved at a very senior level. This is the student who worked with me on this project, David Cloutier. He came with me to Orlando to present this. So he was the VP of our academic student society. And this, so just getting students working with us as faculty members more and more outside of class, and just the two folks from the library here, I think it's wonderful that you're actually providing job opportunities for them. The other thing that we're trying to work on is work with our local school boards. A lot of our local school boards have what I would call practitioner research conferences. So these aren't what I would call academic conferences, but what we're trying to do is find opportunities where our students can present either with myself or their mentor teachers at these conferences. Believe it or not, I can't believe we don't have one. But we don't have a formal undergraduate student research office at our institution. So it's wonderful. We have our students, some of our third-year students, working with our senior administration about trying to create that. So that's the first one. The second one, again, is how important it is, and I always have this terrible saying, but it's look to the right, look to your left, friends for life. And this is so important in a teacher education program because this is going to be your professional learning network for life. These are the people that you're going to call on when you have problems. You'll call on them before you call on me, and probably before your principal, because these are people you trust. So the indicators, again, And we were again surprised because we intentionally, with our course design, our program design, we designed so much group work and things like that, but the students were reporting their perception was it wasn't high quality. So in ours, and it makes sense, I was just wandering around, because as you know, today and the last day is the last day of classes. You go to any room here, students are making presentations, and I think that's a hallmark of teacher education programs. So a lot of them are doing it. A lot of them are working during class, 87%, asking questions, they're working with classmates outside. But another concern we have is what sort of community are we creating? Less than a third are working together in terms of mentoring and tutoring each other. So here's what we've done. And again, you know, I was talking about being a guide on the side or the sage or the stage. Sometimes I'm pretty prescriptive. Sometimes I'm very behavioristic. And so if we want things to happen, maybe we need to structure it. So what we're working on is a plan where there's a formal assignment where all second-year students are required to mentor the first year. And we try to do it in a way that it's really integrated in the practice. So I teach the second-year ed tech class. So all the second-year ed tech students are responsible in the fall for mentoring a first-year student about how to create their portfolio, any problems they have with discussion forums. And now what we're doing is we're trying to create a full mentor circle where we'll have formal assignments, formal activities. So in each year, they'll be required to connect with the others because we find they often get locked just into their year. The next thing, the level of academic challenge, and I'm curious to see if it happens here. There's a lot of talk in our province about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I'll be honest, a lot of people that come into our program, men and women, that's not their primary interest, and they come in with a lot of anxiety around that. And our issue is how do we break that cycle? Because often if they're anxious, they're transferring that anxiety to the young children they're working with. So we were a little better in that, and that's one of the neat things we've done at Mount Royal, is we've got all these foundational courses. We were talking this morning about foundational knowledges. So we've actually designed, it used to be called Gen Ed, but it didn't sound right. So we have these foundational courses that students are taking alongside education all the way from first to fourth year. And I think it's really good. A lot of them are about critical readings that they normally wouldn't do in education. So we actually come in pretty well 7th out of all the universities in Canada around this idea of critical thinking. Where we really don't do well is when we start to get into the quantitative reasoning. So it's wonderful qualitative research, but getting them to understand the power in working with numbers. And again, with us, it wasn't too bad, so just to back at the green, thinking critical and analytically, we're excited about, because that's what we want as teachers. We want them to think critically, be analytical, challenge their students. But in terms of analyzing math or quantitative problems, we're still getting around a third, and we're really concerned about that, especially the nature of our province. We're the major oil producer. We're not the beautiful BC, nature's wonder next door. We're where all the heavy oil is. So we have a lot of pressure from our government just to make sure that all children are comfortable with analytical and quantitative reasoning. So the other thing we're a little concerned is just how much time they're spending on task. But this is something you've heard of, I think, and we picked this up from the University of Colorado in Boulder. This is a movement that's really taking off in the States, and it was fun. Rick and I were in Bologna a couple weeks ago, and again, what is new is old. You think of the Renaissance, think of someone like Leonardo da Vinci, an incredibly talented artist, but an incredibly talented scientist. So what we've done now, in our third year, for the very first practicum, they're taking 4 core programs of studies courses with the practicum in the schools, and we call it STEAM. So they're doing their science methods course, they're doing their arts methods, they're doing the technology course with me, and they're doing the mathematics. So we're really trying to show them how it's important to integrate it, that math doesn't live on its own, that if we want to do amazing stuff with art, we have to understand perspective in that area. Okay, a couple more here. So enriching educational experiences, and I mean, wow, BYU, I was talking to Charles, again, we're not a Mormon institution, so not everybody's going on a mission, but how important it is to provide opportunity for students to get experiences with other cultures or other ways. I'm going to be careful how I say this, very careful, but there's an issue in the world with refugees, immigrants. Right now there's 60 million displaced people in the world, more than there's any been in recorded history. I don't want to do, but we're doing what we can. We're in a cold climate, but we took in, just as the city of Calgary, we took in 25,000 refugees. And so in our school system, that just changed overnight. So again, giving our students the opportunities to work with different cultures and understand different cultures. So again, in terms of high impact practices, all our students are doing practicums, they're all doing capstones. A lot of them are doing community service work, they're doing the normal things. But this is terrible. A third of them in the beginning want to have an international experience, but less than 4 to 6%, almost nobody is having that experience. And it's really interesting, we were working a little bit with the University of Central Florida, these online abroad experiences where you can sort of do things with maybe not physically going there. But what we're doing is we're working with a few institutions and working with our major banks. This is a real trend in Canada. We have spring break, so rather than just going to Florida, Daytona Beach or whatever, are there opportunities that students could go to developing countries and work with those countries, get credit for it? It's called the Alternative Spring Break Program. So that's what we're trying to develop, because just with our schedule, we always can't give them a whole semester abroad. The other problem with our practicum, they have to do a practicum somewhere that follows the Alberta curriculum. We do have schools in Macau, we've got a few schools in China, but they're pretty limited. Okay. The other thing we're working on, and this is where I was hoping that Rick was here, how many of you are working with badges or know about badges? Just a little. This has really taken off. Rick and I were at this badging conference, and it was fascinating because a lot of the people that were presenting there were major organizations like IBM, and IBM has an incredible formal badging program, and it's open to people outside of IBM. I think it's called Big Data University we were talking about. But what we're trying to do is change the curricular record right now, and our employers, who are the local school boards, they don't know what the transcript means. They don't understand the course numbers, they don't understand the descriptions, there's a bunch of numbers. They're going, how does this help me know whether the student can do this or that? So we're moving to more of what's called a co-curricular record, and this is where we're really excited to work with people like Rick and others, because what's happening in Calgary, we're maker spaces, everything like that, is how we could create community badges. So these are badges for not just for service work and work at the institution, but recognize badges and certificates within the community that you're building up. And often you're building up areas of expertise because maybe you're working with students who've got different learning issues and things like that. We've got different foundations to work at it. So I think this is going to be some really exciting work. And just a plug is I think it's 4 to 6. Rick is doing a bit of a summit on badging and portfolios, and I was going to talk a little more about that. So last thing, we've just got about 5 minutes left, open up for questions. The last thing we're concerned about is what type of environment are we providing that really helps students grow and develop, really help them develop their identity as professional teachers. And this is a concern for us. I think you know, you work at a very privileged institution. There's wonderful funding, wonderful support. We were talking about student-faculty ratios and adjuncts and whatever. The problem in Canada, Olga, and a lot of places, most of our universities are public universities, and the majority of funding comes from state or from provincial governments. And every year the amount is going down. Tuition continues to go up, but we're always making cuts. And unfortunately, we're making cuts in the worst place. All our cuts are made with our professional staff. So these would be people who would do counseling, these would be people registration, this would be the advising. And we're really starting to see it in terms of students' perceptions about where they're getting support. Other students is number one, and I think we have to remember that. That is really where the students do get a lot of the support on campus, is student to student. We've developed, like you, we call it the START program, Student Technician Resource Tutor Program. Faculty, we're getting better. We dropped the first year, but at least we're going the right way. And it's mainly because we were developing a new program, getting our hang around. Where we're really concerned, though, is the support, because this is the #1 place they get support. You know, the first place they phone when they want support, when they need grades. And so we really need to do a better job of that. And this is going to be tricky, but I love the model here. I think, Charles, you were saying almost a third? It's incredible the percentage of BYU students that are employed here on campus while they're doing their studies. And I think it's a win-win for everybody. I'll be honest, it is a little bit of a cost savings, but I think they're going to get better advice because students often know better than what we know. So just a few more slides. 11, whether they'd start again, we're interested in that. They were pretty satisfied. They enjoy our program, and again, this is partly marketing. because you have to be careful about student satisfaction data, and I've done a lot of work in this area, is that students are often very unsatisfied with the experience in first year because they're being challenged and they're being pushed out of their comfort level. But then when you see them again, and I see them again at the end of the fourth year, they go, Norm, thank you for giving me that gentle little kick. You forced me to really rethink what teaching was all about and when I looked at things. So the admission process, I was talking to Charles, we have an admission process. We built upon your statewide exams. We have very high stakes exams, not so much in British Columbia, but in Alberta, it's all about standardized testing. So we've completely conditioned after 12 years that that's what learning is taking a standardized test. And so often what happens, we get young people that I love them dearly. Anybody who wants to teach, I love them. It's just that they're not conditioned to working with young people. And that's the problem for us, that they're really good at doing test taking, but they're not good at working with young children. So we want to do admission. I think this is something we always need. It's always that learning partnership. We're only as strong as our community, and probably the largest part of our community is the students, and how we have to honor that student voice, and that we make changes in partnership with the students. The other thing, I'll share this is, if there's anybody in your teacher education program, it's really fascinating to see how universities are making different maps. And this just isn't a map like you gotta take this as a prerequisite. It's looking at the different type of experiences as you go through. Getting the relevant experience, connecting with the community, thinking globally, getting ready for graduation after life. So what I love about these maps, and we're developing it, this one we borrowed from another university, is just helping students create their own maps, their own pathways as they move through the program. So with that, Jason, I did it.
You've got 2 minutes, you can ask
2
whatever
minutes,
questions you
and
want.
I'm just wondering, does anybody online, we'll go to the online people, it's wonderful, it looks like they've got some great comments, flows. Oh great, it looks like they put, I wasn't making it up, Kyle actually pulled out the big data, the IBM badges, benchmark smell sales. You know, that's the one thing I really find, Charles and I are in some interesting conversations just about online and blended, just sort of, you know, there's that for-profit and there's the non-profit world. But I find it must be so challenging to be an administrator these days, any university administrator. My father was one, because you have to balance both worlds. At heart, you're an academic. You really do want to, you know, create the most powerful, the most exciting learning environment. But you have those liberating constraints, and a lot of them are financial. So I think even though it's funny some of the comments I see online here, because it is, again, it's a two-way street. There is the marketing that's going on that we're doing this, but I think what's exciting for me is the marketing's coming through the student voice rather than what we think about ourselves. See you at the badging work. Okay, people are coming to the badging workshop tomorrow. Anybody still awake here? We're hanging in there. I always find when we do these things, you really get a sense of what it's like to be a student in a lecture. And I did a lot of corporate training for a lot of years with Exxon, so sorry about that. I'm used to talking, and once you rev me up. But questions, comments, concerns? Again, just would love to stay in touch with you. I know that you're involved, Tara and Christian, around this whole notion of learner engagement with the faculty and the student. Emily, I'm looking forward to you establishing those competencies. I'm going to pick on a few more people. I'll get to the question. Tad, it's about that experience. Go for it.
I know, well, our time's kind of up, but one of the things that maybe we can talk about it when we go down and have soup kitchen, but you focused at the program level.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, a lot of people, when they look at engagement, they focus at the course level, or even maybe the activity level. And so, just thoughts on that.
So I think this is really important because, again, I hate using that analogy, but DNA, that the courses are really the building blocks for the program. And what's wonderful about this is because, Charles, our experience, you can write learning outcomes. So what we did, you know, we had, what's the ideal graduate going to look like? So what is the knowledge, skills, the attributes, whatever we want to call that, effective domain? And then worked back and made sure we had them covered in the classes. But we really weren't making sure that we just had a, you know, the course, the syllabus, the outline. This, by getting the student perspective, we had great feedback. They said, well, listen, this is where you need to set up the foundation to help us develop the confidence, but we're not there yet. So don't think that maybe we're at the novice level. Take us to the intermediate level on that competency. Take us then as close as you can. Maybe you can in 4 years to the expert level, So now what we've done, we've completely remapped those outcomes, understanding that they are not accomplished in one course, that some of them, the planning, it's gonna take time. Because again, you're moving from learning how to just plan an activity to how to plan a lesson, to actually plan a whole curriculum unit and implement it. So it's been great. It's been really difficult for us as faculty because I'm sure this happens at BYU. We have some faculty, it's not a BYU course, it's their course. And what happens in their course is their domain. Don't touch it, don't ask about it. It's just the secret box. So we've had to open up those boxes, and it's uncomfortable when we open up our boxes because it's sometimes the emperor, there's not a lot of clothing there. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but how do we start to dress it and how do we start to connect it? So in most cases, and again, if we do this with students, that's the other thing we found, it's been really good. The students moderate our discussion. When we've tried to do this around as just faculty, the discussion is not always constructive or positive. If we have faculty or students with us, it's a much more constructive discussion. So I think it's important. Obviously, you need to have things happening in a course, but for a professional program like education, nursing, I think more and more we need to look at more than just creating program level outcomes, is how does it all connect together, really stitching it together. And thank you.
All right.
Go for it,
Let's give
Jason.
more
Time.